We will be recording this session, so others that were not able to join us live can view the video and do the follow along and interact with the Jamboards that we'll be doing later today. So thank you for coming and welcome to our first in a series of workshops based on for the SGEN population on environmental literacy. Today's session is Environmental Literacy 101. And I just wanted to give a shout out to our committee that's been working for a couple of months now to plan these, plan these sessions. So Linda Chilton, Adam Frederick, myself, Lindsay Manzo, Diana Payne, Jackie Takis, and Lynn Whitley. So thank you all. Today's session should wrap up around 5 o'clock. And let me go to the next slide. So today's is 101. We will have the second session on Tuesday, January 18th. At the same time, it will focus on ocean literacy from grassroots to global. It'll be virtual as well. The third session, Fostering an Environmentally Literate Society, will be on Tuesday, March 1st. And then our final event will be a summit at the SGEN annual meeting at NMEA, which should be Friday, July 8th. Time and format will be to be determined, but it will be an in-person gathering. Right. So our goals for today's workshop is to understand what literacy is, and in particular, environmental literacy. We want to help our members reflect on and enhance our own environmental literacy programs to make them better for our stakeholders, and to help our SGEN colleagues to understand the importance of environmental literacy and see how we can help enhance their programs as well. So those are our main goals for today's workshop, and we'll hit the goal number 2 in our first breakout session and the third goal during our second breakout session for today. All right. And I think now is when I'm going to open up the Jamboard. So I'm going to stop sharing this and open up my Jamboard. Okay. Are you seeing the my Jamboard? Okay, great. So the first thing we want to do is just to take a couple of minutes and get your feedback. So go ahead and throw a Post-it note up. If you're unfamiliar with Jamboard, you can add your comments by clicking on this icon here, the sticky note icon. It'll bring this up. You can type your text and hit save, and your sticky note will appear on there, and everybody can see what others are posting, and we can sort and move around. So go ahead and reflect on this for a minute, and then put notes up here about what to you is literacy, and then what is environmental literacy. And this should be editable by everyone. If it's not, let me know. Great, I see some coming in. And for those that are just joining, I invite you to post your ideas on this Jamboard. We're taking a couple of minutes to reflect on what is literacy and what is environmental literacy. And I'll give you another minute or two to post any more ideas. Thank you. We have a lot of good ideas here on our Jamboard, and I'm kind of sorting them out. And as I read through them, I see a lot of similarities, right? So most everybody talks about there's understanding, knowledge of a subject, ability to read and write or communicate about a subject. And then we have a few, like I'm going to point out that, like this one here, that talks about not only that knowledge and strategies. Also, there was one about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So some of our concepts go beyond just the understanding, but then making informed decisions. So behavior and attitudes towards it, in addition to just understanding a topic and being able to communicate that knowledge. Anybody else want to reflect on something that they saw in the Jamboard that really struck them? And if not, I think though that leads nicely into Adam's section about discussing literacy and environmental literacy.
Lisa, there's a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's me. Well, really quickly, because there was one sticky that I wanted to comment on. Somebody wrote, so a lot of us talked about knowledge and an understanding of a subject. And one person over in the top left said, yes, the blue one, understanding and being able to communicate about it. And I like that.
And that tied into me, it seemed to me as well with this one, the ability to read and, well, I guess they're talking about language literacy that way, ability to read and write, but communicating about it, definitely. And here's another one about communicating about it. Absolutely. All right, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing this, but this will be accessible to look at later through the same link that you just used to get to it. But Adam, go ahead.
Thanks, Lisa. Nice to see everybody. What we're going to do next is a very short activity before we start talking about the ins and outs of education literacy and environmental literacy. And this will lead to some very interesting discussion, hopefully today, and probably a lot of ideas that you may have to take with you because our timeline may be a little bit tight. So keep that in mind when we're having our discussions. But I'll try to leave a little bit more time for that versus talking heads and PowerPoints and things like that. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. So you can see the slide, I would presume. So there are 3 things to do here. related to the term education. Think about the term education, visualize it, and then take a few seconds and draw it as if you were playing one of these games like Pictionary or something like that. So go ahead. Okay, that's good. And would anybody like to volunteer to show their picture very quickly here? All you have to do is just hold it up. We could probably see it. It will be entertaining. None of us are expected to be artists. I'm sure there are some out there.
Can we have
Would-
people just put up their drawings? Any, like not just one
Yeah.
person, but everybody like on the
Sure.
camera?
You can just hold it up, and it's always a challenge with the lighting, but so Ashley, for example, Ashley, what is your picture of?
I was hoping I wouldn't be the one to call. So mine, well, it looks like a pirate ship, but it actually is. I've been working on a grant today with our incoming research vessel that's going to be a hybrid electric catamaran. So I was drawing a picture of some shipboard science.
Okay,
then-
great. So you used a location. Okay, very good for your drawing. Anybody else? Let's see. Grace, what do you have?
I know I hesitated to hold mine up because I didn't want it. I was drawing it as if we were playing Pictionary with my family that maybe needs some cues for education. So mine's a classroom. There's a little apple on
Gotcha.
the desk, and
Okay,
that's the
very good.
teacher talking to students. I know that's
Excellent.
just to get them to guess it.
Okay, very good. So when I've done this before with people in a more informal manner, it's interesting how the term education becomes something that is place-based. And that's just something to think about. So we might draw a place where education happens versus what is the endeavor of education. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides and go through some of this, but that's just a brief activity. One of the things you can get out of that is the idea that most people reflect upon their educational experience based on a location, and then from there, they're basically looking at, what is it that I'm doing when I'm in that location. So sorry, I had to switch between screens there because I've got multiple ones. So you visualize basically the place that you're in. Most people visualize, believe it or not, your elementary school or high school. One of those two. Middle school is kind of like a vacuum, I guess, in some way. So if we look at Sea Grant education, and I'm going to ask one of my facilitating colleagues here to put the National Sea Grant page up that has this exact language in it. I went through and I highlighted all of the yellow, which I'm not going to read to you. But just to say, in terms of what is defined in education at the National Sea Grant level, these are all of the terms that are out there. It is not limited to the group of our SGEN network, the education or educator group that we're in, because you see things like undergraduate, graduate, industry, general public, special training programs. There is a wide breadth of information here. We can talk about whether the language and the way it's defined agrees with what the Sea Grant Educator Network thinks should be there. That's obviously another question for us to talk about on a different day, maybe at NMEA this summer. But if you look at all the things that are represented here, this is the broad brush of education that all of Sea Grant is involved in, and not just the number of positions that we have in Sea Grant education at this current time. So there is language on that page. There are numbers that are associated with that page, which I can also show you. Everybody see this page right here? No? Okay.
We're still seeing your slide.
Okay, let me go back because I have to share multiple screens. So let me just go back and redo it. Here we go. There. Okay, how's that? All right, great. So here's what's represented there. Sea Grant Education is made up of 303 educators. This is how many students are reached, graduate students, and so on. This is the language that I cut and pasted in there up above. And it says here, educators refer to the total number of Sea Grant affiliated educators. Sea Grant full-time equivalents are 71. So there's a lot to discuss here. In other words, who is delivering the Sea Grant education? And I'm just checking to make sure we're back on the slides now. Okay, great. So that's a really, really big question. And obviously we know a lot of the different answers to that. We work with many of our colleagues in delivering really valuable education programs in any of these areas that relate to literacy today. And we interact in different ways in our programs to do that. But this is really important for us getting a better grasp on literacy and what that means and how we use it in our programming. So literacy, the essential components that we picked out for our exercise and our discussion today are things related to knowledge, skills, attitude, and behavior, because you eventually want to affect some kind of action in what people do. So no matter what they're learning, there may be some skills involved, there are certain attitudes involved, and then there's ways in which you want them to behave based upon that. So these are the 4 essential components that we picked out. There are many definitions of literacy in published articles on the internet, broken down into charts. Some of them have 9 components, 10 components, 15 components. The question is, where do you stop, or what's practical for what you're doing? So we settled on these 4 in our discussions. And I think you saw a lot of those in the Jamboard activity. We definitely saw things related to knowledge and skills, attitude, behavior. They were all in there. And so I think that's a really good overview and how we might use that today. So literacy being at the center of all of these 4, you can use many, many different ways to represent this to your colleagues. You can use a simple Venn diagram like this, where you have this overlapping segment, or as we get into this a little bit later today, we'll be getting into how do we actually break it down in terms of these 4 parts, and are they equal parts all the time when we talk about certain kinds of literacy. So some interesting things about environmental literacy from an article by McBride et al. 2013. This is an article that is really, really important to all of us in terms of background and history. And it's on our resource page that you used for registration today, and we'll also have it put in the chat. But it is it's a lengthy article. It's got great information in it. What I really think is incredible is that, so this is 2013, and here is the subtitle: what do we mean and how do we get here? So this is a big question, I think, still today. What do we mean by literacy, and how did we get here? And so the article really goes into a lot of very valuable information related to that, and some very good historical points like this. A lot of us are obviously familiar with Rachel Carson's work, maybe not her articles in the New Yorker that predated her Silent Spring by 2 years. But that thoughtful commentary, if you forward that to today, we're still making efforts to shift society to a more proactive, positive position instead of a reactive position. So if we want cleanup on pollution done, we'd rather have people just adopt practices that avoid it, right? Use skills and attitudes and behaviors that simply avoid it versus trying to do the other. And in an article, it's really, really important here by Roth in 1968. He said, how shall we know the environmentally literate citizen? How will we know that? And so literacy, environmental literacy didn't show up until 1968 in literature. And it actually was predated by environmentally illiterate. There were people complaining about people being environmentally illiterate because of all the pollution issues that were coming to light. And so that's the first time that environmental literacy showed up. And I think we're still working on the terminology today. And then the most widely accepted, according to many different articles, is the definition by NAAE, North American Association of Environmental Education. This came out in 2004 and basically hits on the points that we were talking about today related to knowledge, skills, attitude, behavior. They have the word motivations in here, working towards solutions of current problems, preventions of new ones. Again, that gets into being proactive, right? The prevention part of it. So obviously there's a lot to consider here. But what we want you to do is have, a lot of these different ideas when we go into these discussions so that we can unpack some of this in our discussions. We can decide in a way, how do we transfer this knowledge to the other people involved in education in Sea Grant? So how do we quite get there? Well, we look at our own programs first. We're doing activities in, let's say, teacher professional development around aquaculture. And if we want somebody to comprise these ideas of literacy within aquaculture, what is it that we need them to do? And so that's the kind of discussion that we're going to get into today regarding our own programs and regarding other programs that may be done within the Sea Grant network that includes all of us, the communicators, researchers, and everybody else that we interact with. So I hope that provides you with a kind of a simple overview. It's obviously a very complex issue, but I think it's important because we're starting to see the term, this happens in education many times, we're starting to see a term that gets really, really hot and then gets used a lot. And so literacy is that term right now. Literacy is the tagline for almost any content area that you can think of. And so I think we have to be careful in the way that we use it. We have to be thoughtful in the way that we use it. And I think these discussions today will help us get there. So I'm going to finish almost 2 minutes early so we can have a little bit more discussion. And I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Thanks, Adam. All right, so now we're going to go into our first breakout room, and I just want to set it up for you so everybody kind of knows what the expectations are and what we really want you to get out of this. We're going to have, I think we decided on five rooms, 5 breakout rooms, and you'll be sent to it. And ahead of time, we had you think about an environmental literacy program that you do, an example one, and come ready to be reflecting on that in the session. So in this first session, we will look at the knowledge, skills, attitude, and behavior associated with that example program of yours. And we'll have a Jamboard for you to put post-it notes on there. I did one at the top in orange as just sort of an example. So we want you to reflect on your program. In the first column program, just give a real brief description, maybe even just the title of your program, and then think about, how what you do deliver in terms of the knowledge there for that program, what skills the stakeholders are coming away with, the attitude changes, the behaviors. And for this Jamboard, I really want you to reflect on it and think about, where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are. And then in the second half of that same breakout, you're going to think about how maybe you can enhance those areas that are weaker in terms of the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behavior. So don't get lost in the weeds or trying to describe your program so much as kind of reflect on it, see what you're doing well, what you can enhance, and across the different members in your group, see where those similarities are. Are more people able to deliver on the content, but maybe we need to up skills or attitudes, or maybe, the skills are there, but maybe we need to increase behavior. So just look for similarities. Don't get too caught up in the details, because we really do have a small amount of time to do this. But you will have a facilitator from our committee working in there, and they'll put the link to individual Jamboards in your chat. And anybody else? Anybody have any questions before we go to the rooms? All right, see you in the rooms. And we have 20 minutes. Thanks. All right, great. Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you guys had some good discussions. I know we did in our group. I know that we could have taken much longer for that activity than we had. So thank you for being, for rushing through that. What we wanted to do now was just kind of share out. So the committee member that was facilitating your room will have everybody share out what the kind of commonalities, what the take-home messages were from your breakout rooms. So I'm going to just see the first person I see is Adam. You want to share out from your group?
Sure. We had a number of different programs that were described related to watersheds and ecology and coastal ecology in that line of thinking. And it was tough for people, I think, at the beginning to sort of, decide, hey, where's this balance? Where do we find that balance between the knowledge and the skills and all of that? I had put something in about aquaculture education programming, and it really made me think about the audiences that we're working with. And I think the general consensus was that trying to find that balance is really important, but it also depends upon the stakeholders that we were working with. So are these stakeholders new to this idea? Maybe that would shift those 4 items a little bit. And I just thought the discussion was really good. Everybody had a chance to share what they were doing, and I think the next set of discussions will be even better since there's some good background knowledge there.
Thanks. Awesome. Diana.
Hi, everybody. So in our group, we just, everyone contributed a program, and we kind of went through the different ideas that everyone had, and we came up together with a few similarities, one of which was lots of content knowledge, especially about anthropogenic effects on ecosystems. We also noticed that a lot of us in the skills and the attitudes put in increasing confidence for educators to be able to teach a lot of things that we do in our programs. And we also want to destigmatize the facts and take care of being, a lot of us want for the behaviors to be to take better care of the environment. And one thing we noticed is we really need to help them figure out what they can do and like positive actions they can take. Enhancing and improving our programs, providing specific examples of behavior change for folks to follow, and along those same lines, providing mentors for newbies, and providing different resources, whether they be ourselves as human resources or other resources for people to implement what we teach them and take it back to their, whether it's their classroom or their programs.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Let me turn my camera on, sorry. There we go. We had a variety of, I don't think my camera's turning on, so we're just gonna go with it off for right now. We had a variety of programs and really covering a lot of different topics: educator, professional learning, aquaculture, microplastics, and MeWEs, or meaningful watershed educational experiences, if you're not familiar with the term. And similar to what Diana was saying, a wide breadth of knowledge related to all of those topics, aquatic invasives and environmental literacy in general. One of the similarities that stuck out to us as well was that confidence piece. And as both attitude and skill, to really, for our teachers especially, to be able to have that. And we did go through and we starred different things where we felt were strengths, and we didn't quite finish all of that, but it definitely, we seem to be stronger in the knowledge and the skills pieces, whereas getting up into the actual behavior change tends to be where we want to do better.
Thank you. I see a lot of similarities between our groups. And Linda.
I agree with you about a lot of similarities between the groups and ours. We focus very much on coastal issues and approaches, and agree skills and knowledge are stronger. One of the things that stood out, and I'm going to just be real quick because of our time, is how do we measure that? How do we better look at meaningful change and measuring that change? And I know we had a webinar recently that addressed that, but something I think is a goal for many of us to continue to work on, and work on it going not just from the teacher making change, but for the students. How do we help support that growth?
Thank you. And yeah, I think you bring up a good point. The measuring that is always a challenge for us. And then my group, as the final group, we saw very similar to Lindsay, Diana. We're really strong in the strength, really strong in the content knowledge and even the skills. And I think wanting to show confidence in the attitudes, but the weakness is that behavior change. And a couple of the ideas that we had for that were to have ready-made things. So if you're looking for them to do a student action plan, have a ready-made action plan that they can start with. And then, as they become experts, modify that, or a lesson or something like that. Have them leave your professional development with something that they can implement, will bring about action change, behavior change better. We did talk about climate change communication, the worry that we're being advocates or indoctrinating students into a belief system that maybe some of our community members don't subscribe to. And so we talked about how we reframe how we talk about things, and talking about it through something that might resonate more, like the economics of climate change issues might resonate more, and providing stewardship activities so that the students can get involved in those behavior changes might make them more apt to continue those behavior changes. So thank you all. And at this point, we have a time for our break. We have a 5-minute break, and I think we are pretty good on time. So let's go ahead and take the full 5-minute break and come back at 4:30. And we'll continue in the main room at that point for another 10-minute session before we do more breakouts. All right, it's 4:30. So hopefully people are back and they just don't have their screens on yet. So Adam, go ahead and kick us off in talking about our other Sea Grant colleagues.
Unmute myself. I think we all have a good understanding that from the definitions that we've looked at, that our other Sea Grant colleagues are involved in education. And that depends on, a lot on what their role is and who their audiences are. So I think when we consider all of that, we have to look at how we might help them understand ways in which they can vary the amount of the knowledge and the skills and attitude and behavior when they're addressing literacy with their constituents, their stakeholders. in a way that gives them some balance. So it's not just this one size fits all presentation that you do every time you do it on climate education or on coastal sea level rise or something like that. So just having the ideas will make you change your presentation a little bit if you can understand those ideas. And that's a good positive thing to start with. It may not be really well accepted by a lot of people that they're involved in education for some reason. There shouldn't be any negative kind of connotation toward that, but it's a really good opportunity. Education is always an opportunity. So that's where our network is really, really strong. So let me just show you a couple slides before we get into our next discussion, which is really going to be focused on the part about programming and outside of your own programming. That's what we were just doing, how it might be related to your other colleagues that you work with. Okay, so this is what we discussed before in our programming, and then this is how complex this can get. So this is from an education, a series of books on environmental discourse and science ed. So when you're looking at how you want to do things related to behavior and attitude, decision making, networking, all of these things together can get really complex, but they can help you kind of balance out where you're going with your presentation or where you're going with your program. So sometimes you're looking at a program being, I'm just using program as a general term, sometimes that's something that's 45 minutes long. Sometimes that's something that is over a series of meetings, 6 or 7 different days, or it's a whole week-long type of workshop. So all those can fit under there, but there is a lot to consider here. So I think what generally we're after is that when people are using the term literacy, that they have some ideas about what that might mean for them and what that might mean for their audience. Because the audience that you're presenting to may not necessarily be there for something related to, in their mind, related to literacy, but it's actually something that is being conveyed to them in some way. So since we're using the term a lot, it's a really good idea that we break it down and have a better understanding of it. And again, we've focused on these 4 areas today. That does not mean that they're the only 4. So in these next discussions, if you think there are other areas that can be added, bring them up. If you feel strongly about something else that you want to add in there, add that to the discussion. It would be interesting to hear what that is. So I will stop there and we can get on with our next breakout.
Thank you, Adam. So we're going to go into the same groups that we were in before, the same Jamboard you were using before. You'll just advance to the next slide in it that's labeled breakout number 2. And we'll have some discussions about our Sea Grant colleagues, the programs that they're doing and how we can help them. We can reflect on the balance of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors. And as Adam pointed out, any other additional things, and then how we might help them strengthen their programs. All right. And we'll have, this session will be 10 minutes. Right. Thanks, everyone. I know we had some good discussions. We maybe didn't get through a whole lot of different solutions or examples, but I think what we did get through was helpful. Is there any group that wants to share out first? And if no one's jumping, I'll share out because if I do it now, I will remember what we just talked about quickly. So we have people, our Sea Grant colleagues like us are very good at that content. They're providing, their strengths is the content, right? But maybe the weakness is how it's delivered. and then reflecting on that, evaluating that, and seeing how it can be improved. So Grace is working with a colleague to help them with a logic model and think about objectives and how they could revamp their thing. So working with their colleague in that way and sort of planning the whole project to make it more effective is one thing. And another thing we talked about was maybe our help might not be quite so welcomed or happily received by our colleagues. So a challenge is how to make our services available or collaborate with them in a truly collaborative fashion and not feel like we're stepping on people's toes. And also how to not make our involvement seen as a spin-off project or separate project from the whole. So seeing it as a comprehensive project and not just, this is the education element of that. So those were some of our discussions.
I can build on that, Lisa, if you would like. So we had a couple of things to add. Communication, which was something that was brought out in the original Jamboard as another thing to think about besides knowledge and skills. And then abilities was also brought up as another idea as opposed to skills. And we did go back to the demystifying the facts. That's just another one of those things that we really think is important. We shared about ways to do this, about maybe sharing information about different kinds of learning styles. Maybe that's something that our colleagues aren't that familiar with. Sharing effective education techniques. And then we had the same discussion that you did about, we don't want to ram things down anybody's throats, right? So we don't want to come off as like, here, we're teaching you this, or somebody else is teaching somebody something. So we're like, well, how about if we all collaborate on a project, for example, some kind of media project, and we all share our different ways of looking at things. So maybe that's an action to actually get communication, extension, educational working together on a certain project, sharing the expertise.
I'm happy to go to build off that because I think it relates very much. We talked a lot about, we're all so busy with everything that we're doing that oftentimes we're not aware of what colleagues are doing. And so there have definitely been for some folks some real challenges, I think, for most of us with aligning with extension with other areas. And right now that effort to work together to try and solve some of those siloed separate areas of who's working together. So the idea of working maybe on a common approach together seems like one that would really match that. Some programs meet only with their direct reports. Some meet, program wide on a quarterly basis. So this structure that's already in place has a big effect in figuring out how to possibly overcome that. And so to also develop stronger relationships, just like we have amongst educators, would be another possibility. There's great confidence in what one another's doing, but we know that there's ways to possibly enhance that if there's willingness and interest. And so I think this is exciting to see how we can all grow from one another.
Awesome, thank you. Lindsay or Adam?
Yeah, we were both in the same room, so I would say that we didn't have a lot of time to discuss much, but we did hear, and I see some interesting comments there on the Jamboard. Maria, would you mind describing I think your perspective on the PORT program is really interesting, just for people to hear it, and what you thought the strength and the weakness of that was. I thought that was pretty cool.
Sure. So the program that I listed or thought about, because it was hard to think about what other programs that were not educational, but we have what is called a ships log, which is basically a blog giving information about the shipping conditions and the port specific to our area. And some of the weaknesses that I mean, the strength obviously is that it has a lot of content, and the knowledge behind that is really strong. But the weakness that I guess I saw is that it's a little unclear in terms of who the audience is, like who is searching for this information. And so some of the things on how it can be enhanced, one thing that was already in progress is working on a children's book, which was one thing that is interesting in the other comments in terms of like, at what point do we get involved as educators in that piece? Because we weren't exactly involved from the beginning of that project, but we're involved towards the end when it was already kind of done. But the other things that I thought would make that more a stronger enhance it would be to actually create informational videos like Did You Know series of the port, and kind of having some kind of actionable information at the end of like, why do we care? Aside obviously from people wanting their packages and their materials, but tying it into the environmental or the ocean or climate, that piece I feel could be stronger. So
yeah, very good, thanks. I thought it was a really good perspective on the attitude and behavior component, but then also the whole programmatic piece from the beginning, which is something that I think is for us to emphasize is really important. So thanks for providing that example.
And I find it very curious that they were talking about writing a children's book and didn't go to the educator early on. And I think that we've had some really good discussions. Again, I think that they were just the start of what could be bigger discussions. So maybe we'll see how this flows into other things that we do through the Sea Grant Network, Education Network. And I think our group now maybe needs to kind of compile what we just had in these Jamboards so that we have that to take away with us back to our offices and our programs. So, wow, thank you all. We have stayed right on time with all of our activities today. So I just want to share with you the next steps in this series. Let me pull up the slide. There we go. All right, so we do have some post-session work that we want you to do. We have 4 takeaway questions. They shouldn't be that long. You can get to the link for that on the website where you registered. It'll be at the bottom of the ELIT 101 informational page. So if you could do that sooner than later, while it's all still fresh in your mind, that would be helpful. Thank you. The next session, as I mentioned at the beginning, will be in January 18th, also Tuesday, same time frame. We're going to look at ocean literacy. That one will be led by Diana and Linda, is that correct? Yep.
Lynn Whitley.
Oh, Lynn, I'm sorry. Linda, Diana, and Lynn. Yes. All right, thanks. There is some pre-session work from that. You can find that on the website. But basically it's they're asking you to review the ocean literacy framework. And then you can see information about the whole rest of the series for the 3rd date and the summit at the end from the website. Access any resources that we've shared at that website. And I think that is all. Is there anything any of the other planners would like to share with the group?
I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who hung in there until 5. I know it's a tough day on Zoom for a lot of us. You can see where people are meeting from, and it looks like we're all meeting from the same place-based home office for the most part. So thanks a lot for doing that.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was also great to see everyone, and I appreciate it was very interactive. I appreciate all the effort put into the discussions and the thoughts. And so I look forward to working with you guys again in another little over a month. Enjoy the holidays. I hope you guys get some time off, and we'll see you in January. Bye,
Great to
all.
see everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Are we staying on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thought so.
I almost hit the end button.
I know.
Nope.
I was like, am
Stop
I?
recording though.
Oh, let me hit
Right.
stop recording. Thank you.